What would you do if your stepfather sold your sanctuary behind your back without even telling you I was standing outside the rural clinic I'd been helping out at for weeks, sweat clinging to my back under the Arizona sun? It had been a long day of stitching cuts, calming crying toddlers, and working side by side with overwhelmed local nurses. I was tired but satisfied until my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost didn't check it, but the name on the screen made my stomach drop like a stone through a glass floor. Richard, my stepfather. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 6 months by design, and when Richard called, it was never just to say hello. Still, I answered. Maybe I shouldn't have. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice flat. "Catherine," he said far too cheerfully. "Just thought you'd want to know I sold the mountain cabin." I froze. The words didn't register at first. It felt like static in my ear. The mountain cabin. "You did what I asked, already feeling the blood drain from my face. Sold it," he repeated, like it was nothing more than an Amazon return. Figured it was time. "You're never there anyway. Thought I'd put it to good use." I stared into the dust and heat of the open field in front of me, stunned. The mountain cabin wasn't just a place. It was the place. My mother and I had spent every summer there when I was young. Long hikes through pine forests, late nights by the fireplace with cocoa and puzzles. After she passed, it became my lifeline. It was where I retreated after medical school burned me out, where I went when my last relationship collapsed. It was my safe place. And Richard sold it. "You had no right," I snapped, voice cracking. "That cabin wasn't even yours." Richard's response was a smug chuckle. "Relax, Kathy. I've been managing things here while you've been off. Playing superhero in the desert. What's the point of keeping something you never use?" I clenched my fist so tight the phone creaked. "What you don't know," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm, "is that the cabin isn't fully yours or mine. I co-own it with Laura. You can't sell it without both our signatures." There was a long silence on the other end. Then he laughed again. "Well, what's done is done," he said, and hung up. I just stood there staring at the dead screen, my ears ringing with rage. This wasn't just petty theft. This wasn't Richard borrowing something and forgetting to return it. This was betrayal, deep, intentional, personal betrayal. Back in the small one-room apartment the clinic had provided, I sat on the edge of my cot, staring at my phone numb. My pulse throbbed in my temples. I kept hearing his voice, that smug, dismissive chuckle, and all I could think was, how dare he? I opened my photo gallery and scrolled back to pictures from the cabin Laura and me painting the deck 3 summers ago. My mother's favorite armchair by the fireplace, the mountain view at sunrise, all of it gone. Like it was nothing, no. I tapped Laura's name. She picked up on the second ring voice chipper. "Hey, Kathy. You okay?" "He sold it," I blurted out. "Richard sold the cabin." Silence. Then, he what? I explained everything, and by the end of the call, her tone had shifted from disbelief to steel-edged determination. "He's out of his mind," she said. "But don't worry, we've got him. That sale can't be valid without my signature." "Can you pull the documents?" I asked. "I'll finish up here and get home. We need to stop this." "You got it," she said. "We'll take care of this together." As I hung up, a strange calm settled over me. For years, I'd let Richard run roughshod over my boundaries. When he married my mom, I was 15 and grieving the loss of my dad. He swooped in with charm and dad jokes, but underneath he was controlling, dismissive, and selfish. He'd always made himself out to be the hero and me the problem. But I wasn't that silent teenager anymore. I was a grown woman, a doctor, a homeowner, a legal co-owner of the cabin. And I had the law and Laura on my side. He had no idea what was coming. The next few days flew by. Between treating patients and packing up my things, my mind was stuck on Richard. His smug voice, his justifications, his complete lack of shame. He didn't just take my cabin. He tried to erase me from it. I started journaling late at night, scratching furiously into the pages just to release the rage. That cabin had been my reset button. When I was overwhelmed with work, when heartbreak hollowed me out, when I missed my mother most, that's where I went. Once, while repainting the guest room, I found a folded letter my mother had tucked behind a loose panel in the wall. In her handwriting, she'd written, "If you ever feel lost, come here. You'll always find yourself in these walls." I never told Richard about that. I never told anyone, actually, but I remembered it now. This wasn't about money. This was about something sacred, and Richard had tried to steal it. I closed the journal and stared at the ceiling. He had no idea who he was messing with. The moment my plane touched down in Denver, I didn't even stop for coffee. I grabbed my suitcase, headed straight home, and called Laura. She picked up instantly. "I'm back," I said. "Good," she replied, "because we've got work to do." By the time I reached her house, she had the co-ownership agreement spread out across her dining room table. It was pristine, notarized, and airtight. Her fingers tapped the paragraph that sealed everything. Any sale, transfer, or leasing of the property located at 4074 Elkhorn Pass requires the written notarized consent of both parties listed. Laura looked up. "He doesn't have a legal leg to stand on." Relief rippled through me, but it was quickly eclipsed by the raw fury simmering beneath the surface. He thought I'd be too far away to stop him. He thinks I'm still that teenager too scared to challenge him. Laura raised an eyebrow. "Then let's show him he's wrong." That night, I returned to my condo, dropped my bags at the door, and stared at the living room wall for nearly an hour. I wasn't just tired, I was unraveling years of emotional knots. Richard had been a parasite in my life since I was 15. He'd come in after my dad died, swept my mother off her feet, and gradually turned our house into his domain. At first, I wanted so badly for it to work. I even called him Dad once, only once. He corrected me with a smirk and said, "Let's stick with Richard, sweetheart. I'm not trying to replace anyone." But that wasn't true. He was trying to replace something, my voice, my space, my boundaries. When Mom died, I let things slide. I let him take the lead on funeral planning. I let him keep the car. I even let him stay in the house longer than I should have. I just wanted peace. But the cabin was never his. And this time, peace wouldn't come from silence. The next day, Laura and I sat down with a lawyer friend of hers, Monica, who specialized in real estate disputes. "Here's the good news," Monica said, flipping through the agreement. "The sale is invalid. Unless your signature appears on the deed transfer, the county won't legally recognize the change." She leaned in. "But here's the bad news. If the buyer was unaware, they may be entitled to pursue civil damages. Not against you, but Richard. And if this escalates, we're talking potential fraud charges." I blinked. "He might actually face legal consequences." "Absolutely," she said. "He signed something under false pretenses. That's more than a moral screw-up that's illegal." Laura looked at me. "Still want to handle this quietly?" I shook my head. "No, I want it handled correctly." Back at home, I found the mail piled up. Buried in it was a single envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note in slanted, aggressive handwriting. "You're not the only one who cared about that place. You abandoned it. I made it useful again." He didn't even have the courage to call. I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash. That night, my phone rang. Richard. I stared at the screen thumb hovering over the decline button. But then I answered. "Well, well," he said, fake cheer clinging to every syllable. "Back to reality, huh? Ready to move past all this drama, Richard?" I said evenly. The sale didn't go through. His tone soured. "What are you talking about?" "The buyer paid. The paperwork's been signed. Not by me," I said, "and not by Laura, which makes the sale invalid. You tried to sell a property you don't own." Silence. "Then always playing the victim, huh? You're just like your mother, dramatic controlling." I didn't flinch. "You're going to stop. Now. We've contacted an attorney. If you so much as step near that cabin again, you'll hear from the authorities next." He scoffed, but it sounded brittle. "You wouldn't do that to your own family. You're not family," I said. "Not anymore." I hung up. For the first time in years, I felt taller, like I had grown 6 inches just by standing up to him. But the real shock came the next morning when Laura texted, "You're going to want to hear this. Call me ASAP." I did. She picked up on the first ring. I pulled the county records, she said, and guess what? There's no official transfer. The paperwork never got filed. The agent flagged it as suspicious. "So it's not even a completed sale?" I asked. "Nope," she said. "Which means we've got leverage and a paper trail." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "You ready for the next step?" Laura asked. I looked around my kitchen. The same house Richard had told me I'd never be able to afford on my own. The same walls he once called a phase before trying to push me into letting him handle my finances. "Yeah," I said. "Let's shut him down." The morning after Laura confirmed the county never processed the sale, we were already moving forward with precision. The legal equivalent of war drums had begun, quiet, steady, and inevitable. Laura's lawyer friend Monica drafted a cease and desist letter. It was cold, clear, and lethal in the way only legal documents can be. Every word was chosen to eliminate ambiguity. No more family discussions. This was now about property theft, plain and simple. We sent the letter via certified mail and email. I imagined Richard reading it, his smirk twitching as each sentence carved out the reality he refused to face. For once, he wouldn't be able to talk his way out of it. Later that day, I got a call from the real estate agent listed on the unofficial documents. Her voice was tense. "Ms. Daniels." "This is Evelyn Burke. I wanted to speak with you directly." I braced myself. "Yes, I had no idea about the co-ownership agreement," she said. "Richard assured me he had sole authority to sell, but something felt off. So I flagged the transaction with the county office and held off on filing the deed. I let that settle. He told you he was the only owner, yes, and he was insistent," she said carefully. "He brought me a signature page, but when I looked closer, I could tell it had been altered. I couldn't prove it, so I stalled. The buyer hasn't paid in full yet. Did he sign the documents alone? Yes," she admitted. "I have the file if you'd like a copy. That would be helpful." I hung up with Evelyn feeling equal parts relieved and sick. Relieved because someone had been paying attention. Sick because Richard had tried to forge his way through this. Laura and I met up that afternoon in my living room, papers spread between us. She'd already received confirmation from Monica that the cease and desist had been delivered. "What's our next move?" Laura asked. "Detective Miller," I said. "We filed a report. He was calm, professional, and efficient. He reviewed the documentation Laura and I provided, the co-ownership deed, Richard's fake sale, documents the real estate agent's testimony. Each piece was a nail in Richard's legal coffin." "This is sufficient for us to begin an investigation," Detective Miller said. "If Mr. Crawford continues to pursue the sale, or if the buyer was misled, he could be charged with fraudulent misrepresentation." I nodded slowly. "Then let's move forward." I didn't tell Laura this part, but later that night, I found myself standing in the cabin's driveway. I'd driven up there alone, unsure what I was looking for. Maybe a sign that it was still mine. Maybe a memory I needed to relive. I walked inside and everything was still there. The throw blanket folded over the arm of the couch, the framed photo of Mom and me on the mantel, the books we'd read by candlelight during power outages. None of it had changed, except me. I wasn't here to reminisce. I was here to reclaim. As I stood in the kitchen staring at the small wooden table where Mom used to sit with her tea, I pulled open the bottom drawer on instinct, and there it was. The letter. My mother's handwriting was soft, slanted, and familiar. I'd read it 100 times. My Kathy. If you're reading this, it means you've returned. Maybe you're tired. Maybe the world has been loud. I want you to know this cabin is yours, not just in deed, but in spirit. This is your shelter. Protect it. And don't let anyone convince you that your peace is negotiable. Love, always, Mom. I sat down and cried. Not angry tears, not even grief. Just the kind that come when you finally stop running from what you know to be true. This place was mine, and I would defend it with everything I had. The next day, Detective Miller called again. Miss Daniels, he said, we've reviewed the full document trail. We've also spoken to the buyer. They're willing to halt the transaction and cooperate with the investigation. I exhaled slowly. So, the sale is void, yes, he confirmed. Legally, the cabin remains under you and Miss Langley's ownership. However, we are preparing to question Mr. Crawford. If you're willing to pursue charges, we'll proceed. I am, I said. He crossed a line. He doesn't get to walk away from this one. Understood. That night, Laura came over with a bottle of Pinot Noir. We sat on my porch under a thick blanket of stars. To your mother, she said softly, raising her glass. I raised mine. And to never letting someone like Richard walk all over us again. We clinked glasses. I wasn't just reclaiming a cabin. I was reclaiming my voice. I should have expected it. Richard was never the type to quietly accept defeat, especially not from a woman, let alone the stepdaughter he once dismissed as just a sentimental kid with no backbone. So when the knock came at my door 2 mornings later, I already knew who it was. He didn't even wait for me to open it. He barged in as soon as I cracked it, strutting past me like he still had some authority in my life. "Catherine?" he drawled, flashing the same insincere smile that had fooled too many people for too long. "We need to talk." I closed the door behind him, but stayed standing. I wasn't going to sit and play house. "I got your little letter," he said, dropping his keys noisily on the table like he still lived here. Very official. Very dramatic. I folded my arms. Good. "Then you know this isn't a game." He scoffed and dropped into one of my dining chairs like he owned the place. "You always did have a flair for the theatrical. Look, I admit maybe I moved a little fast, but you weren't using the place, Kathy. I figured why not put it to better use?" I took a slow step forward. "You forged documents, Richard. You lied to a buyer. You told a real estate agent you had sole ownership. That's not moving fast, that's criminal." His smile faltered. "Just slightly. You wouldn't go that far," he said, voice tightening. "We're family." I tilted my head. "Are we?" He stood up suddenly as if trying to reassert control. "Do you know what I've done for you? I stepped in when your mother couldn't handle things. I kept the lights on." No, I interrupted. "You kept the lights on for yourself. You took over her house, her car, her life. And now you tried to take mine. And I let you for years, but not anymore." He looked stunned, as if hearing me draw the line actually broke some unspoken rule. "You think you're so righteous?" He spat. "Always the perfect daughter. Always the one who got away." "No," I said, voice calm but firm. "I was the one who stayed quiet too long." He blinked. That hit. Harder than I expected. Then came the venom. "You know what, fine. If you want to drag this through the courts, go ahead. But don't come crying to me when the rest of the family turns their back on you. You'll be alone. Again." I felt that old fear rise in my chest, the one that had always silenced me. But it faded just as quickly as it came. I took a breath. I'd rather be alone than let someone like you walk all over me again. That silenced him. For the first time in my adult life, I watched Richard reach for his coat with a shaky hand. "You'll regret this," he said. "No," I replied. "You will." He slammed the door behind him. I didn't flinch. Instead, I called Laura. "He showed up," I said, pacing the living room. "Tried to bluff, guilt trip, threaten, and I didn't let him." I said. I held my ground. There was a pause. Then her voice, warm and sure, "I'm proud of you." That night, I took my laptop and began organizing the evidence, the signed co-ownership documents, screenshots of Richard's texts, a copy of the cease and desist, the flagged real estate paperwork, Evelyn's statement. Everything was in one folder. I titled it, "Cabin Defense, Final." Later that week, Detective Miller followed up. "We've contacted the buyer and confirmed their willingness to withdraw," he said. "They're angry, of course, but not at you, at Richard. He misrepresented ownership. That's grounds for fraud. We're preparing formal charges." A strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness swelled in my chest. satisfaction that justice was in motion, sadness that it had come to this. "Do you want to move forward with pressing charges?" he asked. I paused for a moment. Then yes, I do. For years, Richard had chipped away at my confidence, my independence, my peace. Every guilt trip, every manipulation, every backhanded comment at family dinners, every time he told me I was too emotional, dramatic, or selfish. This wasn't about punishing him. It was about protecting myself. That evening, I returned to the cabin with Laura. We walked through each room, inspecting everything from the hardwood floors to the old window frames. Everything was intact, but it felt different now, like it had been cracked open and put back together with stronger glue. We sat by the fireplace sipping wine in silence, the flicker of flames dancing across the walls. "To the fight," I said, raising my glass. Laura smiled, and to winning it. I smiled back, not because I'd crushed Richard, but because I hadn't crushed myself to keep the peace. 2 days after our quiet toast by the fireplace, I got the call. Miss Daniels, Detective Miller said, his tone clipped but calm. "Your stepfather, Richard Crawford, has been formally charged with fraudulent misrepresentation and attempted illegal transfer of jointly owned property." I didn't respond at first. I just sat on my couch staring at a dust mote suspended in sunlight, realizing the moment had come. This wasn't a theory anymore. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't one of those imaginary speeches you rehearse in the shower. It was real. "Thank you, Detective," I finally said. He cleared his throat. "He'll be required to appear in court. Based on the evidence you and Miss Langley provided, the case is strong. If convicted, he could face fines and a probationary sentence, possibly more depending on his prior record." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I understand. You've handled this with grace," he added. "I know it's not easy standing up to family. It's not. But it was necessary." After the call, I stepped outside and leaned against my porch railing, staring out into the trees that lined my backyard. I thought about everything Richard had taken from me, almost taken: my peace, my voice, my mother's legacy. But not this time. The following afternoon, Laura met me at the cabin. She brought a thermos of her famous maple chai and a folder of renovation ideas. "Figured it's time we put some fresh life into this place," she said, grinning. We walked the perimeter, taking note of places that needed touch-ups, peeling paint on the porch steps, moss creeping across the side, paneling a cracked window frame in the guest bedroom. But it didn't feel like damage. It felt like potential. "Let's do it ourselves," I said. Her eyebrows shot up. "You sure you've got enough on your plate?" "I want to. Every brushstroke, every repair, it's a reminder that this is ours." Over the next few weekends, we did just that. We patched the roof, sanded the floors, planted wildflowers around the porch, rehung the wind chimes my mom used to keep by the front door. With each fix, I felt stronger. Not in a loud, triumphant way, but in a steady, grounded way. Like every hammer strike echoed, "You are in control now." Richard called once more right before his court date. I didn't answer. His voicemail was exactly what I expected. Blame, resentment, self-pity. "You have no idea what this is doing to me. I thought we were family. I didn't deserve this. You always twist things, Kathy. Always. Delete." Later that week, I got a call from someone I hadn't expected: my mother's sister, Aunt June. She'd heard about the situation small towns have long echoes and wanted to check on me. "I always worried about Richard," she said. "Your mother." She saw the charm. I saw the cracks. "She deserved better," I whispered. "You all did," she replied. "But look at you now. You didn't just survive him. You held him accountable." I didn't know I needed to hear that, but I did. That same night, Laura and I stood on the back porch sipping wine again. We watched the mountains fade into dusk. "You know," she said, "there was a time when you'd have tried to reason with him, tried to make peace even at your own expense." "I know," I said. "I'm done with that." We toasted again, this time without words. The peace was louder than any speech I could have given. The cabin felt like it was breathing again. Mine. Fully. Finally. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No dramatic wood panels or high ceilings, just beige walls, stiff chairs, and a humming fluorescent light that buzzed like it knew secrets. Richard sat at the defendant's table looking shrunken in a cheap navy suit. His lawyer whispered something into his ear, but he barely reacted. For the first time in years, he looked small, powerless. The judge read the charges: fraudulent misrepresentation, attempted unlawful property transfer, and false documentation for financial gain. Each word felt like oxygen to my lungs. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and approached the front. The judge had asked for a short statement. "I'm not here out of revenge," I said. "I'm here because someone I trusted used that trust as a weapon. The cabin isn't just property. It was the last place my mother and I shared together. He knew that, and he tried to take it anyway." I looked at Richard. He's done this before, not with houses, but with words, with guilt, with manipulation. I used to think I had to accept that because we were family. But now I know that blood doesn't justify betrayal, and silence isn't strength. I stepped back. The silence afterward was heavy. The judge nodded. Richard didn't even meet my eyes. He took a plea deal that day, avoiding jail time but accepting full responsibility and agreeing to pay legal fines restitution to the potential buyer and to never interfere with the cabin again. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. That night, my mother called. Not a voicemail, not a letter. She called. We hadn't spoken since the charges were filed. I assumed she was angry or ashamed or in denial. When I picked up, her voice was low, hesitant. "I heard what happened in court," she said. I didn't answer. After a moment, she added, "You did what I never could." That caught me off guard. I always made excuses for him. She continued, "Even when I saw it, even when I felt it, I thought it was better to have something than nothing. But you chose better. And I wanted you to know I'm proud of you." I closed my eyes. I hadn't realized how long I'd waited to hear that. "Thank you," I whispered. We didn't say much else, but we didn't need to. That small call healed something old. In the weeks that followed, Laura and I finished the renovations. We framed my mother's letter and hung it in the hallway. Every weekend at the cabin felt like stitching back pieces of myself. One sunny afternoon, Laura asked, "So, what's next for you?" I thought for a moment. "I'm going to keep volunteering, traveling, living how I want. But this time, I'm not shrinking myself to make space for other people's comfort." She grinned. To that, we toasted again, but it wasn't about victory. It was about liberation. In the final days of summer, I stood on the porch alone one evening. The pine-scented air wrapped around me. The sun dipped below the ridgeline, casting golden light across the roof we'd repainted, and I realized something simple but seismic. This cabin wasn't just where I found peace. It was where I fought for it. I ran my fingers over the wood railing, smiled to myself, and exhaled. Not because the war was over, but because I'd finally stopped surrendering. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who thought they could walk all over you? Share your story in the comments. And if Catherine's journey inspired you, don't forget to subscribe, and stay tuned for more powerful stories like this.